Morning. Now, this one, to be honest, I'm not really sure what this one is. I woke up yesterday morning, day before, whatever. Well, the first couple of lines were running around in my head, so I wrote them down, and the rest of it just kind of followed. It doesn't seem to be one thing or something else, but anyway, here we go. It's called When Pauline Met Barry. It goes like this. Now, Pauline lived in Dorking, and she came in every morning on the 06:45 to Waterloo. And then the Waterloo and City line would get the Cheapside just in time to grab a Costa and to use their loo. She checked her Facebook on her phone and drank her coffee on her own. Sometimes she'd have a bacon roll. She'd cross the street and through the door, walk up to the second floor and take her place in financial control. Now, Barry came from Leatherhead, a lovely town it must be said, and lived at home still with his mum and dad. He didn't get out very much and went to Subway for his lunch and sat and ate it from a paper bag. Well, that day Pauline went there too and didn't quite know what to do. She'd only been to Subway once before. While wondering what bread to choose and only getting more confused, she noticed Barry sitting by the door. She thought she recognised his face but couldn't put it into place, so smiled and kind of nodded as you do. Barry knew her straight away. He saw her each and every day on the 06:53 to Waterloo. She got her sandwich and she left and went to eat it at her desk. She didn't have much time for lunch today. Her job was very stressful and her boss was temperamental and she wouldn't have it any other way. All 5 o'clock at last came round and coat and scarf and homeward bound, first to Bank and then to Waterloo. The underground had turned up late, a train already at the gate, and she had to run to catch the 1:45. She dove in quickly through the door and dropped her handbag on the floor and all the contents spilled out on the ground. And Barry jumped up from his seat and dropped down quickly at her feet and handed her the little bits he'd found. "You're the bloke from Subway," Pauline said and smiled at Barry. "And you're the girl from the 06:53. Barry went back to his seat and, thinking she was very sweet, he said, "Why not come and sit down next to me?" Well, they got on like a house on fire. Barry had always been a trier, so he handed her the number for his phone. "You cheeky bugger," Pauline said as he got off at Leatherhead, but knew she'd call him as soon as she got home. Well, she thought she'd made a blunder when she dialed Barry's number and she heard another woman say hello. She hummed and hawed and stuttered, then she coughed a bit and uttered, "Oh, I'm sorry," and was just about to go. "Oh no, I'm Barry's mum," she said, "and Barry's just popped down the shed to tell his dad I'm dishing up the stew." "Who shall I say is calling? Can you tell him that it's Pauline with the handbag on the train from Waterloo?" So Barry took the phone and went upstairs to be alone and left his mum and dad there in the kitchen. His stew went back into the pot and mum said that she'd keep it hot, and besides that they didn't really want to listen. Well, they talked and laughed for hours. Then Pauline went and had her shower while Barry went and ate his bowl of stew. And the next day in the pouring rain while Barry waited for his train, he checked his watch at 06:52. Well, the train pulled in at platform 4 and as he stepped in through the door, he saw her sitting in her usual seat. There was no one sat beside her, so he quickly sat down by her and he leant across and kissed her on the cheek. "You're very bold today," she said, and gently slapped him on the head and laughed then when she realised what she'd done. And they talked and joked like lovers do until they got to Waterloo and arranged to meet for lunch at 1:10. Then she drank her coffee on her own and checked her Facebook on her phone, but all the time her thoughts would be elsewhere. He couldn't wait for their lunchtime date and making sure he wasn't late, they met in Pret in Paternoster Square. Then back to work for both of them, and at 5 o'clock they'd meet again for dinner and a glass of wine or two. Now that went better than they'd planned, and both their mums would understand why they missed the last train home from Waterloo. Well, the weeks developed into months, and by now they knew each other's mums, and Barry's dad had mended Pauline's car. And they said that when the weekend came, they'd take the car out for a run, but Barry didn't want to go too far. So they headed for the Sussex coast, and the weather was as warm as toast as they walked along the seashore hand in hand. They'd found an handy parking space and they'd thrown a few things in a case, so they spent the night in Brighton in the Grand. Well, the next day it began to rain as they were strolling round the lanes, and Barry ducked into a little shop. Pauline didn't notice, but the shop that was the closest was not the one where Barry chose to stop. The shop was full of diamond rings, lots of other blingy things, the kind of shop where Pauline liked to linger. And Barry walked up to the counter, took the ring that he'd had altered and slipped the diamond onto Pauline's finger. Well, Pauline was delighted, not to mention quite excited, as Barry dropped down right there to his knee. And just the way he had it planned, he reached out and he took her hand and said, "Pauline Hawkins, will you marry me?" She burst out into happy tears among the sounds of claps and cheers from everybody walking down the lane. As Barry stood and kissed her cheek and Pauline could hardly speak, they knew that life would never be the same. Well, the rain stopped and the sky was clear as they walked out on the Brighton pier, and they went and had their lunch of fish and chips. And they went and saw a fortune teller, a funny little Jewish fella who made them both laugh with his well-worn tricks. They thought it would be nice if they could stay another night, but the next day Pauline had some things to do. In the morning she was making plans with that shiny diamond on her hand on the 0645 to Waterloo. The wedding day was coming soon and Pauline was well over the moon with a wedding dress that Barry's mum had made. Her dad took care of the caterer and the drinks that they'd have later, while her mum made sure the florist had been paid. Barry's father knew a bloke with a print shop down in Basingstoke and he'd paid to have the printing done already. And also for the wedding cake that the next door neighbour's son would make from a recipe he got from Mary Berry. A real old-fashioned wedding that, with everybody's blessing, would take place in Pauline's parish church in Dorking. The hymns and songs were chosen and their vows would now be spoken after listening to an old Beach Boys recording. Her father, McAnally, was a friend of Pauline's family and he'd known her ever since her first communion. He'd met with Barry once or twice and thought he was very nice and was honoured to be asked to bless their union. Well, came the day, the 1st of May, a lovely sunny Saturday, and a Rolls Royce pulled up at the church in style. And Barry turned to watch his bride. He couldn't help but beam with pride as Pauline's father walked her down the aisle. "I do," she said. "I do," he said. And Pauline blushed a shade of red as the priest said that her middle name was Starlight. Happy ever after, and among the tears and laughter, Tony Bennett sung The Way You Look Tonight. And so on Monday morning, as the train pulled out of Dorking, the 0653 to Waterloo, our couple walked along the sand with morning coffee, hand in hand, and watched the sunrise on their honeymoon. The stranger sat in Pauline's seat without a thought that she might meet someone who would join her on life's ride. But when they got to Leatherhead, a fella turned to her and said, "You're the girl from Costa in Cheapside." God bless.